You're listening to Shoe In, covering the ins and outs of all things footwear, from sneakers to heels, loafers to slippers, and every type of shoe in between. Brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. And now your footwear insiders, Matt Priest and Andy Polk.
So as our introduction says, we're focused on politics, trade, fashion, retail, and this episode covers all of those mixed in.
One big stew, is that what you're saying?
Exactly.
Yum.
I'm stirring it right now.
Is it beef?
Nah, it's actually steak.
Steak
chili.
I like it.
I upped the game.
Is it a canned soup?
No. I made it from scratch.
It's fresh.
All
from
my chilies
Costco?
from scratch. No.
You go Costco.
I'm a giant, man. They have smaller cans of beans.
Andy is not like.
I'm not trying to make a big. I'm not like a witch. It's not a witch's brew where it's like a huge cauldron.
You have to feed 300 people.
I'm not feeding the Roman army and camped out in my backyard.
Is it for a Southern Baptist potluck?
Well, if that was true, I would make sure I would burn it just so it would fit in with all the other food.
At
Sorry,
least it's sanitary.
Well, there you go. Anyway, so this episode is on all those things.
Right.
And it's straight from the mouth of one of the leaders of our industry who, honestly, what's really great about this episode is we don't actually hear much from the leader of Columbia Sportswear, but they have a renewed focus that they just announced this year where they're trying to double their footwear sales.
Yes.
So, as they've been, when we think of Columbia Sportswear, I think a lot of people think of apparel and all the innovations there.
Yeah.
But they're doing some really innovative things with their brands and with their refocus on footwear.
They are. So they brought in Peter Ruppe, who's an industry veteran, who's going to be really driving that and helping to think through more how they can be more dominant in the footwear space. But what was cool about having Tim on at the Executive Summit, which is what we're going to listen in on in this episode, was the fact that you're right, Andy. He picks his spots where he's vocal and he's out front, and he's done it particularly effectively over the last year or so in the advocacy space. So we honor Columbia Sportswear as our Advocate of the Year because they put a full page ad in the Washington Post as it relates to the government shutdown because the parks were shut down. They also have been active on the trade side because they import most of their product, as do most footwear and apparel companies in the United States. And so paying more in duties is not something that we support and don't see the utility in that. And so they've been really effective in pushing that message out there. They had a full page spread, a full deep dive into the company within the New York Times. And so Tim, who's been on Shoe In before, God bless him for that, spent some time with us here in Washington, to talk about the ways in which you navigate on the advocacy side. How do you pick your spots and prioritize what your issues are and stay true to those issues?
Right. And
then on the business side, why are they bullish about footwear? And so I think as folks listen in, they're going to get it straight from the horse's mouth.
Educated.
They are going to get educated. So with that, Blake, tee it up. Let's
educate
listen.
us.
This has been an uncertain and chaotic time, as we all know, for a few years for sure. Let's get right to it. The administration's moves have led a lot of us to wonder where all this is headed. I'm sure it's led you to wonder that as well. And those of us who have been concerned about the current trajectory of U.S. trade policy, the departure from the Trans-Pacific Partnership, China 301, what are we missing? Is there a reason to believe that this has all been a worthwhile roller coaster?
Well, what other choice do we have but to go through it, right? So, we're very fortunate having obviously terrific people helping us to run the business. But, we have a broad distribution geographically. So it's not uncommon that we would have a problem in some geography where a despot would raise tariffs on some product that we had already imported or planned to import, or does something that's crazy. You don't expect it here, but we've learned over time that you have to be prepared for these things. And one of our directors, who we just announced his retirement, was an early director for the company, always preached fortress balance sheet. So you're going to have issues. So we always rely on the fact that we've been able to salt some money away and have the amount of capital we need to get through periods of time which are going to be unusual, and they always are, it seems.
Yeah, sure. Now, the economy is whizzing along right now. There are a couple concerning things on the horizon, but so far things are going well. Is there a method to this madness, or do you kind of see these as two separate issues? Is the trade uncertainty holding us back, do you think, in some ways? Could the economy be even better?
Yeah, I think it could be. And I think, our history of our company is that we've grown sometimes at the fastest pace at the weakest economies. So honestly, especially when we look at the footwear business, we're quite small in this business. So there's huge opportunity in the category, and we just have to take advantage of it. So we try and make ourselves agnostic as it relates to the particular economic conditions that might exist in any particular geography. But it could be better, and frankly, the lives of all Americans, whether or not you're in the footwear business or not, could be improved with a different approach to politics and frankly, immigration.
Sure. Now, I'm going to get right to those points, and this is the question I've been wanting to ask you since you were willing to come on stage with me. You recently told the Portland Business Journal, and I quote, "It's one of my New Year's resolutions to get on Trump's enemies list," end quote. With the sprawling piece in the New York Times, which we'll put up here on the screen, that you recently had, and the full-page ad in the Washington Post regarding the shutdown, you've really upped your public profile in the advocacy space, and how's that playing out for you? What's been kind of the feedback from outside the business for you?
Well, frankly, I'm always amazed that anybody would care what I say, frankly. But I think it's important if people are willing to listen to you and you have something to say and you have a point of view which goes beyond the business, frankly, you ought to say it. And so, for whatever reason, people are at least listening to me. They may not agree with me, which is fine. But I'm not running for an office. I'm just pointing out things that many people, I think, agree with. Some don't, which is fine. But it's important, I think, to say these things when they occur.
Do you prioritize which issues are of interest, or is it just, are you reacting to kind of the chaos of the moment that we seem to be in?
Well, it seems, there are plenty of things to react to, so you try not to be too big a voice, and really when it's just strictly important. But I think for us, for the business, we have immigration is an important aspect in my life. My mom's parents immigrated from Germany in the 30s. My mom was a young girl who came to the U.S., fortunately, escaping Nazi Germany. And so it's really part of my DNA and our family's DNA. So those things are critical. And when we see issues like what's happening today on pick any border of the United States, I think it's important that you have to say something if people are willing to listen to you. And then, as it relates to the business, there's just a lot of bad things happening right now for business in the U.S., in my opinion. So we've tried to point those out when it's appropriate.
What are 2 or 3 of those bad things you think are happening for business?
Well, I think if you're a farmer today and you're going to be planting a crop that you may harvest in 6 months or something, or in the case of many of my friends that live in Oregon who have cherry orchards, you put a tree in the ground and maybe in 15 years you're going to get some crop off of it. So how do you make decisions like that? We can make decisions in our business where we could purchase something, and if we can't liquidate it in Turkey, then we can move it to some other country or even to the U.S. But we have these businesses, these people, their lives are being used as pawns for some benefit, which frankly I don't recognize what that benefit is.
Can't figure that out, yeah. Let's talk about maybe some reaction within the company. One of the things that was interesting to me during our I worked a decade of my life in the Trans-Pacific Partnership and the prior administration, and in this job, pushing and pushing and pushing. It was going to be a huge opportunity for our industry. And we did a lot of advocacy outreach within our member companies, and I took for granted that I thought everyone would, if they worked at a company that would benefit, would see the value of the Trans-Pacific Partnership. We learned over time that wasn't always the case. People don't always align kind of what's good for the business with their own personal views on trade or eliminating tariffs. Has there been kind of feedback within the company about the ways in which you engage on the advocacy side?
Well, you'd like to think that everybody who worked in our company or our business, you know, we're in Portland, so there's a few footwear businesses based in Portland. You'd like to think that people in Portland would recognize that, first of all, it's a big world out there. Your life, your career at work is much richer if you're working with people from around the world than if you're in an insulated parochial position. But even in our company, not everybody agrees, and you know, nobody's asking for, you know, complete loyalty on any particular topic. But
that happens here, not in Portland. So.
You know, you just have to work hard to convince people that what you're doing is the right thing to do. And I know that the TPP has been discouraged or eliminated here, but we've had significant benefits from it in some of the other countries we work. So it's not gone without some recognition.
Talk to us about ways in which you've kind of planned from a business perspective about the uncertainty, whether or not there's 301 tariffs, whether or not the Mexico border shuts down, you know, all those things. Are there ways that you can strategically plan for those storms that may or may not happen?
Well, I think today in the U.S., your best defense is having, as I said, a big balance sheet that you can rely on, so that you don't have a significant problem that's going to damage the business for a long period of time. You know, we've been public since 1998, so obviously investors have the opportunity to move their inventory and shares to companies that they either like or don't like, and think the prospects are poor or good, whatever. So, you know, there'd likely be some change in our company's valuation as it relates to what Wall Street thinks we're worth. But I think you just have to be prepared to manage around chaos, and you know, so far we've been able to do that.
Yeah, you talked about going public. It's interesting because one of the things that Peter Bragdon and I talked about was the Sorel story, right? Mm-hmm. So you bought the Sorel trademark out of bankruptcy for $8 million. At the time, it was solely a cold weather boot company with Walmart as its biggest customer. This year, it will be as big as the entire value of Columbia Sportswear Company when you went public in 1998. Tell us about the Sorel story, how you reinvigorated that brand.
Certainly. Well, I think almost everybody in the room must know about Sorel. It's an old company. It was started in the early 1900s in Canada and was really a men's winter boot work brand. And then in the mid-90s, people decided they were going to go snowboarding, and that was the original snowboard boot. And I think what happened with the management there is that they got caught up and made investments around the snowboard boot business, which just wasn't sustainable. So they fell on hard times. And when we bought the business, the largest customer was Walmart, and the second largest customer was Cabela's. Cabela's we knew, and of course we knew the business well just from having competed or having seen the business. And we really thought, you know, maybe the opportunity there was to make it a better men's winter boot brand. So we worked diligently on that. And a guy who was running all of our footwear business at the time, all the brands, Mark Nenow, who some in the room may know, said, you know, there's something here about this thing, and I think there's a real opportunity for us to improve that business, make the brand much more than it is today. And really, that was about making it a women's brand. And so we have significant investment in men's products in Sorel, but it's really about women today. And Mark is a passionate guy who talks at length about, product is queen with Sorel. We have to make sure that we have the right stuff. And yeah, the revenues at Sorel today are about just slightly north of what Columbia's revenues were when we went public in 1998.
That's amazing. Let's talk about transformation. So beyond Sorel, you talked that footwear is a small portion of Columbia's business. Are you bullish about footwear overall? What are your plans for footwear as it relates to the overall business?
Well, talking about successes, I've been saying since we went public that footwear should be the largest product category in the company. So I'm a failure. It's only about 20%. But there is enormous opportunity in footwear for us. And, we talk a lot about this at the company. Nobody needs another brand of footwear apparel. I mean, there are plenty of companies, plenty of brands, all of them, well, not all, I mean, many of them really superior products, and to be congratulated, the people in this room who represent that. But it's all about, if we're going to be in that business, we have to offer something different. We have to have points of differentiation which are recognizable by consumers, by retailers, and that's where we've struggled. We have a few successes, and which we've been rewarded with good sales on those things where we've been where we have a point of differentiation, but we need more of those things, and that's why we really added Peter Ruppe to the team, a guy who's many in the room may know Peter, who's a real industry veteran, and we've given him the assets to make the business much bigger, and I think that will hopefully after 20 plus years, our business will actually be led by footwear. So that's my hope.
So that's great. We love to hear that as a footwear organization. Let's go back to the advocacy a little bit, because one of the things that I think companies have struggled with in this time, and you've done a great, you've been out there as we've seen on your ad and those kinds of things. Companies seem to step in it sometimes. They alienate their consumers on one end of the political spectrum, or they alienate on the other. We're so kind of combative right now as a society. How would you advise a company to navigate the political waters without ticking off half of your consumer base?
Well, I don't know. We've probably ticked off half of ours, so I'm not maybe I'll get them to answer that. But I think at the end of the day, whether you're running a business or you're a human being, there has to be certain principles, and those things, some have to be inviolate, and you just have to say, we're willing to be as flexible as we possibly can be, and we'll say yes every time we can. But when there's certain issues that we're just not willing to run from, and where we believe that advocacy can be important, then you have to pick those things. And if people are upset and don't buy your products because of that, that's sort of their problem.
Amen to that. So administrations have a tendency to come and go in this town. Eventually someone else will occupy the house just down the street. Will you continue to be very proactive in this space? Will you continue to voice where you think future administrations kind of step out of line with your values? Do you think this is kind of a unique time in history?
Well, again, I have no idea why anybody listens to me. So
we're about to find out. We're going to open up for questions here soon, so be ready.
Well, I mean, it's, again, when we see things that are important to us happening, we'll make comments about it. But I'm not running for office, so it's.
So you can speak your mind. That's what you're saying.
Well,
when you run for office, that all shuts down.
Yeah.
Yeah. So those are the questions I had for Tim. What questions do you have in the audience? And we have mics in the area that will be making their way around. So raise your hand. We got a question over here.
Thank you, Tim. Sean from L&E International. So I really like what you said. You said if your footwear needs to offer something different to your customer. So in your mind, what do you guys offer that's the most different with your product?
Well, it's it might be an interesting story about how we acquired Sorel, because we had an enormously popular jacket called the Bugaboo, which was a very different jacket, had a zip-out lining, and you could wear it in a bunch of different ways, and it was colorful, and it was much more popular than anything we'd ever done before. And our sales guys came to us and said, hey, these guys from Sorel are running around right after our sales presentation selling Sorel boots that match our jackets. So I got an appointment with a guy who many in the room may remember, Rob Strasser, who was one of the early Nike founders, who had left Nike and had a little boutique. And I said, so hey Rob, should we be in the footwear business? He goes, I don't know. So let me think about it. So he went away and called me and said, well, you know, there's probably something there for you. There's probably an opportunity for you guys to do something, but we have this agreement with Adidas, which really precludes us from doing any business to anybody else in the business. But what the hell, you're from Portland, so we'll just help you out. So Peter Moore, who was Rob's partner at the time, designed this thing called a Bugaboot, which was, it was basically a cross between a Sorel and an athletic shoe, which was an enormous success, and we still leads the company's sales volume today. It's a very different kind of shoe. At the time, it was unique. So that's one of the areas where we've been strong, but it's not winter everywhere all the time. So we have to have some products which are appropriate in lesser climates. And one of the areas where we have a point of differentiation is in our fishing product. We have a very successful line of fishing apparel called PFG, Performance Fishing Gear. And so we have some footwear that's resonated with people who are fishing in saltwater for tarpon and permit and other kinds of fish. And so that kind of footwear works really well, especially in the southern part of the United States and in Central America. So, but it's about points of differentiation. So we have to find those things in other categories of footwear as well, and that's what Peter's charged with doing.
Mm-hmm. Question. What other questions do you have for Tim? Over here.
So Perry Williams from Under Armour. Had a question about your advocacy. I thought you made a good point about issues that you refuse to budge on and standing for those issues. But how do you define those things? Are there things that affect the business? Are there things that affect your employees? Like, what are the boundaries of those things that you're unwilling to budge on, and how do you define them?
Well, I suppose it has to be, for me, an intersection of where there's a personal connection and a business connection. So, we've been very vocal specifically about the immigration issue, because of my family's background. But we had a really telling experience earlier this year when we were visiting our Panamanian distributor, who's responsible for a big section of northern part of South America. This guy grew up in Panama. He was a Lebanese immigrant. His family moved into Panama before he was born. And he's got a son coming up in the business, and the son's 15 years old, I guess, maybe something like that. He said, I really want to bring my son up to Columbia, to Portland. I'd like him to meet some people, but I'm afraid that he'll be taken away from me at the border. And those kinds of things are quite telling for me. And that's when you have to say something, and you have to make sure that people hear you. And so those are the kinds of issues that would bubble up to me to say, hey, it's appropriate for me to say something.
Good question. What other questions? Over here.
Thanks, Tim. Matt Schreiner with WL Gore, makers of Gore-Tex fabrics. And I just want to compliment you on stepping up and taking a stand on something that feels so important to you and your family. Really takes courage to do that. I'm curious how your corporate culture maybe informs some of your business strategy in these turbulent times? How does the culture within the Columbia organization really reinforce some of the challenges you guys see and all the success that you're having?
Okay. Well, first and foremost, we're a growth company, and W.L. Gore was a big part of our company's history. We were strictly trying to save the business in the middle 70s, and we were doing private label apparel construction. So sorry, I'll get there. We were doing private label apparel construction for Eddie Bauer in Seattle, and they called, said, "Hey, these guys from this company in Maryland have invented this fabric which is waterproof and breathable. We'd like you to make a few jackets for us." So we made the jackets, and the stuff looked really interesting, and so we made a few. We connected with the Gore company, made a few of these garments, and lo and behold, in Japan, there was an enormous demand for this kind of product. So it really saved the business. Our connection with Gore, which is again a very different kind of product, and the demand in Japan for our stuff was a coincidence. And now I've lost track of what the original question was, but
Corporate culture.
Corporate culture. Sorry. Well, everybody here knows you have to work really hard. So we try, when we're talking to people about joining the company, look, you're going to come here, you're going to work hard, but you have to have fun. So we try not to take ourselves too seriously. We're making products for people to use outside, have fun, skiing, hunting, fishing, playing, whatever they're going to do, and to support their passions outdoors. So you better have some fun. You're going to come and work hard, but have some fun, and let's just not take ourselves too seriously. So we try and make that pervasive across the company, and it's in some cultures it's more readily adapted than others, but at the end of the day, that's sort of what we talk about.
Up front, Chris over here. Yeah, I can attest to the culture. There's a vibe there. It's hard to replicate. It's a lot of fun.
Hi. So I don't have so much as a question as a statement, and that is, I would love to hear your story on a regular basis on a podcast. I think what you have to say is awesome. I think there's an entire generation of consumers out there that are dying to connect with you and love the country and the trees and our parks and want to support immigrants, but just as importantly want to see somebody or hear from somebody who is successful and wise, but is making a statement, possibly at the detriment, but I don't think so, of his company. And I bet if you quantify it after a couple of months, it would actually be in the best interest of your company, and you will reach an entire generation of consumers that are dying to create a community and have a lot to learn from somebody like you. And I applaud your bravery. I think that's what the world really needs right now and wants.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Ron. Just a shameless plug, Farrell, Tim was on the Shoe Show. So if you want to go to shoeandshow.com, you can scroll through and see his story. You can hear his story there, and we'd love to have him back, of course. Any other questions?
Tim, Rick Muscat from Deer Stags. Matt, in his introduction, talked about the events that brought you into the business. You were still in college. Your dad died suddenly. Your mom called you in. I think you said it was about $1 million business at the time. Could you tell us a little bit about that? How you went from being a college kid to come into a family business, and what experience you had or what you learned along the way during those first years?
Sure. Well, I grew up in the business. My grandparents, when they immigrated in 1938, bought this little hat and cap company, which was basically a jobbing company that distributed products around the Northwest. And so I grew up in the business, working in the warehouse with my grandmother. And when my dad would go on the road, my grandfather would go on the road selling. And so it was sort of a natural part of growing up, writing catalog copy or whatever. And so I went off to school planning to go to law school. And when my dad passed away in December of 1970, he had just taken out an SBA loan. So, the business was really fairly levered. And but I probably didn't even know what the word leverage meant, because I think I'd just gotten a D in my accounting class. It's the only accounting class I took, actually the only business class I took. So I came home from school. My mom had not been in the business before. My grandmother worked in the business, and she was still alive at the time. So we diligently went to work, and if we thought we knew exactly what we were doing. And in 1971, our revenue was $500,000. And by the middle 70s, we'd lost all the equity in the business. We had a negative net worth of about $400,000, and the banker who'd loaned my dad the money said, you guys are going broke. You got to sell the business. And so that was really my MBA, was trying to sell the business. It was a tiny little small business. We had a factory in the basement of our building in North Portland, and so just trying to survive. And that was really my MBA program, was trying to sell that business. People would say, well, why are you doing this, and how come you're not doing that? And so I got the chance to learn a little bit that way. And then, frankly, the best offer we got for the business was for $1,400, and my mom said, well, we can get rid of it for that. We can screw it up for that. So, no. And then the banker said, well, you know what you guys really need? You need a board of advisors, and you really don't know what you're doing, and you need some people in here that are business people to help you. He said, I just loaned some money to some guys starting a shoe business out in Beaverton. Maybe I can get one of these guys to come, on your board. So he talked to Mr. Knight. Mr. Knight said, yeah, we got one of our guys from Price Waterhouse that just joined the company. Maybe we can get him to come over. So people in the room may know Ron Nelson. His nickname was Nelly. And so Nelly came on our board and, just said, you guys are doing all this stuff over here. You really need to be doing this stuff over here, and helped to direct us. And he left our board when he was named the director of the apparel. Nike was just going to get into the apparel business. So that was in 1980 or something like that. But we really credit him for that, getting us on the right track. And so fast forward to this year, that banker that called our note is the guy who's just retiring from our board. He's been on our board for probably 30 years. And we were able to convince Ron Nelson to come on our board. So we still get together with those two guys who really were instrumental in saving the business. And so, the rest is history, as I say.
That's awesome. And with that, Tim, I'm humbled by your willingness to have this conversation. Thank you so much. As you can see why Columbia Sportswear is the Advocate of the Year, please help me in thanking Tim for his time today.
Yeah, so, again, Tim took us on a journey.
Yep.
A lot of what has driven their concern, particularly on immigration, on trade, is the story of the Boyle family and Tim's family fleeing Nazi Germany.
Right.
And so when you think about what really motivates people, what their values are, it starts way back. And
right.
Some really monumental issues that have plagued this planet. And it drives them to be more out there on these advocacy issues.
I would say in this age, when we talk about branding and transformations and things like that, I think authenticity is key. People rally around people who are authentic and tell their stories.
Yeah.
And I think, he in some people's minds, his positions may be controversial, but when you hear the story, you can't argue with someone who's basing values on their own personal character and their personal integrity and their own values and ideas, right?
Yeah.
It's not like he's out there saying these things because he's an upset citizen. I mean, he is upset in many ways, but he's not an unthoughtful person that hasn't thought this through, hasn't lived through these things. And so you have people out there who are always upset about something, protesting something, whatever, and it's just protesting for protesting's sake, and they are not doing that. They are sticking true to their values.
Yep.
And just like we heard from many of the other speakers, it's all about connecting with that consumer and educating that consumer as to what those values are and why they're that way. And then it's like the aha moment is I actually want to buy a product that actually has values.
Yeah.
That isn't just floating out there selling me something, but this is what we
thoughtful.
stand for. You can like it or not, but this is who we are. And by the way, the product's pretty damn good.
Yeah, it's awesome. And he was awesome. So what an
awesome.
honor for us to have him on our stage.
Yep. So with that, we hope you enjoyed the episode. If you have questions, comments about the episode, please drop us a line. If you have ideas for show topics, show speakers that we should have on to cover different things, especially if you're facing current challenges and you really have a legitimate question, drop us questions. We'd love to do a question and answer session where maybe we just do all Q&As that we get from the industry. Drop us a line, shoeinshow.com. We're on Facebook, we're on Twitter, and until next time, Shoe In is out.
Shoe In has been brought to you by the FDRA, the Footwear Industries Association focused on retail, trade, politics, and fashion, helping create and enhance conversations on all things footwear. For information about FDRA, visit fdra.org.